I still wake up screaming sometimes 30 years later, clawing at sheets that feel too much like wet grass beneath my fingers. My wife asks what's wrong and I tell her it's nothing, just a bad dream, but we both know I'm lying. There are some things you see as a child that never leave you, that burrow into the darkest corners of your mind and wait there, patient as death itself, ready to remind you that the world is far stranger and more terrible than we pretend it is in the daylight. What I saw that night in Miller's Park changed me forever. And I'm telling you this story now because I need parents to understand something crucial. Never, ever let your children play outside after dark. Not in small towns, not in safe neighborhoods, not anywhere. Because something is always watching, always waiting, and it's hungrier than you could possibly imagine. It was the summer of 1994, and I was 11 years old, living in a forgettable little town in rural Kentucky, where the biggest excitement was usually when someone's cow got loose, or the Dairy Queen got a new flavor. The kind of place where everybody knew everybody, where doors stayed unlocked and kids ran wild until the streetlights came on, sometimes longer. My parents were good people, but like most parents back then, they believed that childhood meant freedom, that kids needed to roam and explore and make their own mistakes. They never imagined that some mistakes you don't survive, or worse, that you survive them but wish you hadn't. Miller's Park was our kingdom that summer, a small patch of green space on the edge of town with a rusted swing set, a tilted merry-go-round that squealed like a dying animal, and dense woods pressing in from three sides. Looking back now, I can see how wrong it was, how that park sat like a trap at the border between civilization and wilderness. But when you're 11, you don't think about things like that. You just think about where to hide during hide and seek, who's going to be it next, whether Jenny Morrison might hold your hand if you get brave enough to reach for it. There were 5 of us that night. Me, Tommy Brennan, Jenny Morrison, Jake Sullivan, and little Marcus Webb, who was only 9 but tagged along anyway because his older brother Jake wouldn't leave him home alone. The sky had been threatening rain all day, heavy grey clouds pressing down like a lid on a pot, and by evening, when we met up at the park around 8 o'clock, a thick fog had rolled in from the creek that ran through the woods. It wasn't the gentle, romantic kind of fog you see in movies. This was something else entirely, something dense and cloying that smelled wrong, like wet earth and rotting vegetation, and something underneath that I couldn't quite identify, but that made my stomach turn. The fog clung to everything, muffling sounds, turning the familiar playground equipment into hulking shadows that seemed to shift and breathe when you weren't looking directly at them. Jenny said we should go home, that it was too creepy. But Tommy called her a chicken, and we all laughed. The way kids do when they're trying to prove they're not scared, even though their hearts are hammering in their chests. We decided to play hide and seek anyway, because what else were we going to do? Admit we were frightened of a little fog. Tommy was at first, counting to 50 by the rusted merry-go-round, while the rest of us scattered into the darkness. I could hear their footsteps squelching in the wet grass, Jenny's nervous giggle somewhere to my left, Marcus whimpering that he wanted to stay close to Jake. I ran toward the edge of the woods, where I knew there was a good hiding spot between 2 large oak trees, their roots twisted and exposed like arthritic fingers, clawing at the air. The fog was even thicker at the tree line, so dense I could barely see my own hands in front of my face, and the temperature seemed to drop about 10 degrees the moment I stepped under that canopy of leaves. I crouched down between those roots, my jeans immediately soaking through from the damp ground, and tried to control my breathing, listening for Tommy's footsteps, for the sounds of him finding the others. That's when I heard my name. Not shouted, not called out loud, but whispered, soft and sibilant, sliding through the fog like a snake through grass. "Denny, Denny, come here. Come see." I froze, every muscle in my body locking up because I knew that voice wasn't Tommy's, wasn't any of my friends. It was deeper, rougher, with a quality that reminded me of wind moving through a tunnel, hollow and echoing. My first thought was that it was some creep, some adult playing a prank or worse, and I should run back to the playground, back to where Tommy and the others were. But then I heard it again, and this time it was coming from deeper in the woods, and there was something about it that pulled at me, that made me curious despite the fear that was starting to coil in my belly like a cold snake. Kids are stupid that way. We're drawn to danger like moths to flame, convinced of our own immortality until the moment we learn otherwise. I stood up slowly, my knees cracking in the silence, and peered into the fog-shrouded woods. At first I couldn't see anything except the ghostly outlines of trees and the suggestion of undergrowth. But then, maybe 30 feet in, I saw a shape. A figure? A man, or at least something man-shaped, standing absolutely still between two pine trees. He was tall, impossibly tall, and even through the fog I could see that he was watching me, though I couldn't make out any features. He raised one arm slowly, deliberately, and beckoned to me with one finger in a come-here gesture that children learn means approach from the time they can walk. "Come here, Danny," the voice whispered again, and now I could tell it was coming from that figure, though his mouth, if he had a mouth, didn't seem to be moving. "I have something to show you, something wonderful. Every instinct I had, every lesson my parents had ever taught me about stranger danger, screamed at me to run. But I didn't. God help me, I didn't. Instead, I took a step toward the woods, then another, drawn by a curiosity I couldn't explain and can't forgive myself for even now. The fog seemed to part slightly as I moved forward, creating a narrow corridor between the trees, and the figure retreated deeper into the woods, staying always the same distance ahead of me, still beckoning. I could hear my friends behind me now, Tommy's voice calling "Ollie Ollie Oxen Free" in the distance, but it sounded muffled and far away, like I was hearing it through water or thick glass. The smell was getting stronger the deeper I went. That rotten earth smell mixing now with something else, something metallic and sharp, that I would later recognize as the smell of blood, fresh blood. Though I didn't know it then. I must have walked 20 or 30 yards into those woods, branches scraping at my arms and face, roots trying to trip me, before I got close enough to really see the figure. He had stopped moving, waiting for me, and as I approached, the fog seemed to thin just slightly, just enough for me to make out details I wished to God I had never seen. He was wearing what looked like old clothes, torn and stained, hanging off his frame in tatters, but that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was his face, or what should have been his face. In the dim light filtering through the fog and the canopy, I could see that his skin was grey, the colour of old meat left too long in the sun, stretched tight over bones that seemed too large, too angular to be human. His eyes were the first thing that really registered, 2 points of yellow light that didn't reflect but seemed to glow from within, like flashlights behind dirty glass, and they were fixed on me with an intensity that made my bladder threaten to let go. "That's better," the voice said, and now I could see that his mouth was moving, lips pulling back, and I stopped breathing completely because those weren't human teeth. They were too long, too sharp, like someone had taken broken glass or butcher knives and shoved them into gums that were black and bleeding. There were rows of them, more than any mouth should hold, overlapping and jagged, and his tongue, when it flicked out, was thin and forked like a snake's, tasting the air. "You're a curious one, aren't you, Danny?" "That's good. Curious children taste better. More flavor, more fear to savor." I wanted to scream, wanted to run, but I couldn't move, couldn't even breathe, like my body had completely disconnected from my brain. I just stood there, rooted to the spot like one of the trees around me, watching as he took a step closer, and that's when I saw the horns. They curved up from his temples, thick at the base and tapering to needle points, black as obsidian and gleaming wetly in what little light there was. They weren't costume horns, weren't plastic or rubber. They were real, growing from his skull, and I could see where they emerged from his skin, see the raw, weeping tissue around them. He took another step, and his hand reached toward me, and I saw that his fingers were too long, each one ending in a curved claw like a bird of prey, yellow and cracked and caked with something dark that flaked off as he moved. The paralysis broke all at once, like a rubber band snapping, and I screamed. It came out of me like something alive, like something trying to escape from my chest, high and shrill, and full of more terror than I'd known I was capable of feeling. I screamed and stumbled backward, my feet tangling in roots and undergrowth, and the thing, the creature, whatever it was, lunged forward with a speed that shouldn't have been possible for something so large. I saw its mouth open wider, impossibly wide, the jaw unhinging like a snake's, and more teeth appeared, row after row of them spiraling back into a throat that seemed to go down forever. It made a sound that I can't even properly describe, something between a growl and a laugh, and the sound of bones breaking, and the smell that rolled off it was overwhelming. Rot and death and something else, something older than death, something that smelled like the inside of a grave. I don't remember consciously deciding to run. My body just moved, pure survival instinct taking over, and I crashed through the undergrowth like a panicked deer, branches whipping my face, roots grabbing at my ankles like hands reaching up from underground. I could hear it behind me, crashing through the woods, moving faster than anything that size should be able to move, and I could hear its breathing, wet and ragged, and that terrible laughter echoing off the trees. The fog seemed to grab at me, trying to slow me down, thick fingers of moisture wrapping around my arms and legs, and I kept screaming, kept running, convinced with every fiber of my being that I was going to die, that those claws were going to close around my neck and drag me back into the darkness where no one would ever find me. I burst out of the woods and into the clearing of the park, my lungs burning, my legs like rubber, and I could see the others standing by the playground equipment, their faces turning toward me in confusion and alarm. "Run!" I screamed at them, my voice cracking. "Run! There's something in the woods! Run!" For a moment, they just stared at me like I was crazy, and I risked a glance back over my shoulder, expecting to see the creature emerging from the tree line, expecting to see it descend on all of us. But the edge of the woods was empty, just fog and darkness and the suggestion of movement that might have been branches swaying or might have been something else. Tommy was the first to react, his face going pale even in the poor light, and he grabbed Marcus's hand and started running toward the street. The others followed, Jenny's eyes wide with terror. Jake looking back and forth between me and the woods, like he was trying to decide whether to believe me or call me crazy. We ran all the way to my house, the closest one to the park, our feet slapping on wet pavement, our breath coming in gasps and sobs. I kept looking back, kept expecting to see that tall figure emerge from the fog behind us, but the street stayed empty, and by the time we reached my porch, stumbling up the steps and hammering on the door, I was starting to wonder if I'd imagined the whole thing, if I'd had some kind of panic attack or hallucination. My mum opened the door, took one look at our faces, at me shaking and crying and barely able to stand, and pulled us all inside, demanding to know what happened. I tried to tell her, the words tumbling out in an incoherent rush, about the man in the woods, about the horns and the teeth and the claws, but even as I said it, I could see the disbelief in her eyes, the concern that maybe something was wrong with me, that maybe I was sick or having some kind of episode. My dad called the other parents to come pick up my friends, and then he grabbed his flashlight and his hunting rifle and went out to the park with Mr. Brennan and Mr. Sullivan to investigate. I begged him not to go, grabbed his arm and cried and told him there was something dangerous out there. But he just patted my head and told me everything would be okay, that they'd check it out and make sure no one was lurking in the woods. They were gone for maybe 45 minutes, and I sat on the couch with my mom wrapped in a blanket even though it wasn't cold, shaking and jumping at every sound. When they came back, my dad's face was troubled, but he told me they hadn't found anything. No signs of anyone in the woods, no footprints, nothing. He said maybe I'd seen a deer or a bear, that in the fog and the darkness it could have looked like something else, something scarier. He said my imagination had run away with me, that it was natural to be frightened when you were alone in the dark. But I knew what I'd seen. I knew it wasn't a deer or a bear or my imagination. I knew it was real as the claw marks I found on my arm the next morning, 4 parallel scratches from shoulder to elbow that my mom tried to tell me I must have gotten from branches, even though they were too deep, too precise to be from any branch. I knew it was real because of the nightmares that started that night and never really stopped. Dreams where I'm back in those woods, where I can feel its breath on my neck and hear it calling my name in that hollow, whispering voice. I knew it was real because 3 weeks later, a homeless man disappeared from a camp in those same woods, and when they found his belongings, there was blood everywhere, sprayed across the trees and soaking into the ground. But they never found a body, never found any explanation for what might have happened to him. I'm 41 years old now, married with 2 kids of my own, living in a city far from that small Kentucky town, and I have never, not once, let my children play outside after dark. Not in our fenced yard, not on our safe suburban street, not anywhere. My wife thinks I'm overprotective. My kids think I'm mean. My neighbors probably think I'm paranoid, but I don't care, because I know what's out there waiting in the darkness, patient and hungry and clever. I know that the world we see in daylight is just the surface, that underneath there are things that shouldn't exist, things that our ancestors knew enough to fear, but that we've forgotten about in our arrogance, in our belief that we've conquered the world and made it safe. I'm telling you this story, whoever you are, whatever town you live in, because I need you to understand something. The old rules existed for a reason. Don't go into the woods alone. Don't talk to strangers. Don't stay out after dark. These weren't just suggestions or old wives' tales. They were survival instructions, passed down through generations who knew, who had seen, who had lost children to things that couldn't be explained or fought or reasoned with. We've gotten complacent in our modern world, with our streetlights and our cell phones, and our belief that everything has a rational explanation. We let our kids wander freely, trust that the world is safe, assume that nothing bad will happen because nothing bad has happened yet. But I'm here to tell you that assumption is wrong. There are things in the dark places, things in the woods and the abandoned buildings and the fog-shrouded parks, things that have always been there and always will be, no matter how many houses we build or how many lights we install. They're patient, these things. They can wait decades, centuries for the right moment, the right victim, the right combination of circumstances. And they're hungry, always hungry in ways that go beyond physical hunger, hungry for fear and pain and the particular sweetness of innocence destroyed. So please, I'm begging you, don't let your children play outside after dark. Keep them close, keep them safe, keep them in the light. Because I got lucky that night in Miller's Park. I ran fast enough, screamed loud enough, got out before those claws closed around me. But luck runs out eventually, and not every child is going to be as fortunate as I was. Not every child is going to make it home. And when you're lying awake at night, wondering where your son or daughter is, why they're not answering their phone, why they're 15 minutes late getting home from a friend's house, remember this story. Remember that there are worse things than being overprotective, worse things than your kids thinking you're mean or old-fashioned. The worst thing, the absolute worst thing, is knowing you could have kept them safe and didn't. That you let them walk into the darkness because you thought it couldn't happen to you. Couldn't happen in your neighborhood. Couldn't happen in our modern, rational world. I still see it sometimes out of the corner of my eye. A tall figure standing at the edge of a parking lot, at the tree line of a park, in the alley behind a restaurant. Always watching, always waiting, always wearing that terrible grin with too many teeth. And I know with absolute certainty that it's still out there, still hunting, still calling children into the darkness with promises of something wonderful to see. Don't let your children answer that call. Don't let them find out the way I did, that there are things in this world that shouldn't exist but do, things that hunger and hunt and never ever forget. Keep them inside when darkness falls. Keep them safe. Because I'm 41 years old and I still can't sleep with the lights off, still can't go near woods at night, still wake up screaming sometimes with the memory of those yellow eyes and that forest of teeth. Don't let that be your child's future. Don't let them see what I saw, please. Just keep them inside after dark.